Hello world, Great Giza Pyramid, system engineering and system flow. So let's go over the model. We have the actual structure would be 452, 53 feet tall. At the engineering on the outside, but for the way we're going to discuss the system, might as well clue you in. There is a larger step at the 35th level, which the rest of the structure is all a smaller gap than that, which will allow a buildup of static electricity on the surface of the structure, and basically making the circumference of the structure be acting as a Van de Graaff ball, where you have just a ball of static electricity. It is that static electricity which we are going to pull into the system, and at the halfway mark is where two conduits come down into the system. Now, one of them actually, that's about right, one of them breaches the surface, the other one goes to the surface. And what we are going to do in our model is all organically, eventually, we're going to build out to organically. The model can start with stimulated setup, but eventually it will be all earth-given powers. The structure will be eventually as green can be. And forgive some of my artistic license here, I'm not the best. What we're going to do is we're going to fill a pool of water with a pyramid on the inside of it. This pool of water will be allowed to spill in to the entranceway, which we are going to configure with a double bubble chamber system to make the water level at that elevation, which is actually below the water level, be the water level of the system inside. We're going to add the pressure bubble to make this elevation a new elevation. That new elevation is actually going to, within the system, if I draw this correctly, within the system is going to be at a level where the hallway that is within the system will be below it, such that the pool that is in the center of the structure, the area that I like to refer to as the arc chamber, the Tomb Dogma calls it the Queen's Chamber. We can go into a great deal the configuration of that room, but I'm just going to go over it quickly and then work backwards. This pool will be an isolated pool of itself, other than the atmosphere within the system. We're going to get into that. Let's just work with me here. There, at ground level, there is another room. We'll put it about there. This room is referred to as the grotto. It's a very unique room. It is configured so that the water within the room can't rise up and it can't go down. The pressures kind of lock it in there. And it is in contact with natural ground earth. The pit down here in the subterranean chamber, we are going to modify it from natural ground earth. Now, we could just set something up with like a 9-volt battery or AA battery, or I'd really like to try to consider a solar panel or a hand crank generator, something where, as far as it's sitting there and being a model, we could do it with electricity. But either way, just split the water into its two respective gases. Electrolysis, very simple. The oxygen primarily is going to come out this side, boom, and out of the system. As it comes out of the system, it is going to be working with that double bubbler system I was talking there to lower the water level, the mean water level within the system. The 0 point of our control system here. Now we are going to allow the system, when it's at its 0 point, to have this static electricity have a path down to earth, to ground. And as the system grows, we're going to choke the natural path and provide an alternative path. And this is how we are going to capture this static electricity that is out there on the surface of the structure and capture it into the structure. If we follow every single rule that they provide here, provided by following the system and just simply taking the hydrogen out of this side, piping it up and bringing it into the top. Now they use a flow control valve of bubbling the hydrogen in from underneath the bottom of the structure. From what I can tell thus far, when they bring it into the structure, I'm going to try to do it at that elevation and just blow it up. They have a lip, and then behind that lip is a configuration of, actually that goes down to a lower elevation, of thus, so that the hydrogen will bubble from there into here, and then from there out of the lip. And that elevation is there, and it will bubble up into the system, and this, I believe, would be primed by that being filled. Now, I believe that would have to be primed and have to start by being filled. And only that, we're going to get into how there's actually a pool within this whole area, but that is the only part that's necessary. And the wall that's in this first area that they like to call the antechamber, the pre-chamber, the one that has the boss mark in it. You have to duck to get into there. You can stand up and you have to duck to get back into there. Well, this would be resting on the floor, and I do not believe was actually solid to the floor. I've seen no evidence of a actual contact. That would be sitting there. It would allow for some leakage, but would primarily be a resistance factor for the system and the water that's going to be generated as our system is going to do. So this will be a flashback arrestor when filled from the environment within here. It's also environmental control between the environment within this part of the system and the environment within that particular room, which I call the combustion chamber and historically has been called the King's chamber. In this particular room, the configuration is such that the entrance of the inlet for the air, because this is actually the air coming into the system right here, this is going to be the mark right there, is such that as the water level goes too high, or it rises, it chokes itself off. It's got a shape, the inlet, where that's the division. And when the water comes in, it chokes its inlet off, and as the water goes down, it lets more in. And that will allow the air, which is 21% by volume oxygen, will allow the oxygen in that's going to recombine with the hydrogen, which is being pumped into the room, and will rejoin to create water. And that water born in this elevation is what will come down through the system via I'll get back to it. Condensation and precipitation will bring the static electricity using nature down into the system. All those little droplets of water, reason the whole side is ribbed there, so that it will form droplets of water and drip down into the system. Each one of them will be more pulling the static electricity down into the system. The way the whole system is set up, will allow this conduit to act like a tea kettle, and within the system that's in there, and it's fire in the middle, will spew steam, moisture, humidity up into that conduit, which will then condense and be running down into the conduit every time, pulling a little bit of static electricity with it. The Thieves' Tunnel, hardly talked about because it doesn't fit the tomb dogma, which sits just in front of the boss mark and runs into the west off of the hallway. That is where this conduit falls down into there. And on the same elevation, the same mark there, if we were to pull this through, it has a conduit that runs right at an elevation above that mark, runs down the top of the channel, and then shoots up and joins with this conduit. And if I was to actually draw this right, it is, I believe, part functionality, that this actually runs behind it at approximately the same elevation as the rim, the little rim that runs down their little one rim that runs down the side, little 2-inch rim. That gets more into the communication, so just use it as a marker. But if I was to have drawn this correctly, but like I said, I didn't do it to scale. So the system in here is going to be acting with all the condensation and precipitation. You're going to get a trough sitting behind the boss mark. If you look at the back of the boss mark, how it's shaped, you can kind of see where there was a trough connected to it, and then this being the elevation of the hallway. This would allow for the condensation within that room to be dripping, filling that trough, and dripping over the edge down into the system. Now that actually would be dripping on the east side of the hallway, dripping down into there, and would be another source of water born at a higher elevation in a unique environment. And I'm not 100% sure it's water, because when the system is all at play, aside from air being 21% oxygen, it's also 78% nitrogen. And there's this really cool thing called NH3. Actually, they kind of put the 3 up there, don't they? So I think there may be some other compounds at play, but this is where modeling it would come into play. So we're just going to follow the water as far as the system flow. This element, or it wouldn't be an element, a compound that is in this trough and dripping down there, is going to be acting in conjunction with the conduit of liquid that is coming down and falling into the area of the Thieves' Tunnel. They are both at the same elevation, and they're both working together there. And you can see evidence of scarring where there was a spark of some, either the liquid yielding energy to the air, or as two liquids are coming close to each other, something shorting there. And every now and then there's going to be a spark. That spark would cause these gases and these liquids to burn together. And you can see the scarring on the older pictures. They've since patched a bunch of it, where you get a jet of flames bursting out of there. Now it's not going to be constant. I don't think it's going to be like a furnace. I think it's going to be an occasional burst coming out. That will push the environment down. It's going to add higher pressure here, pushing the environment down. Now as all this is occurring, you're still going to get a lot of condensation, humidity and stuff coming into here, and condensation in this room. The condensation in that room is going to be acting inverse of the steam kettle up here, where it's going to be causing a lower pressure. And that would be it's going to start sucking the environment in. So you're going to be pulling the steam, as well as you're getting nudges from it up here. So the whole system is designed and engineered to push the environment down into there. Probably a force multiplier, increasing its efficiency. Now in this room is going to be quite the ringer. This room is engineered such that within that room there is a what they like to call a niche. I will point out, and because mathematically they did it this way intentionally, and when you see what it's doing, you'll understand and appreciate its specialties. You take the center of the room. This niche doesn't cross over the center line until like the third step down. Then, so now it puts it off center of the room. Within the room, there's a conduit in the wall that goes back such that the back edge of this niche, all the way to the tail end, as far as you can go, that is the center point of the room. That this is where the magic comes in. And the top of it is engineered in such a way that the water that it would be condensating on the back of this wall and running down the wall is going to hit an area where it's pushed towards the center of the room. It's kind of pushed towards the center of the room. You look at those grooves, it looked like a bear was sitting there scratching, pushing it towards the center of the room. So it's meant to drip there. If you look right at the top edge, it's nice and smooth across there, a nice level cut. And there are like two little areas where there's like little slightly larger gaps, just two little notches. Lines up with the way back of the tail, how it goes into that room, and as it goes back into the room it keeps cutting over in areas and getting a little bit smaller, but right back at the end there's one small box right at the end. It's also the same place the floor level happens to be up. If you look at the floor level as it goes in there and then steps up right at the end there. That's right where that little box is. That little box lines up to mark that is the glory hole spot, that they're looking for one drip of water in the static electric environment, the haze that consumes that room, that golden drop of water, or whatever liquid it happens to be, is falling down and looking to release its energy. And you have quarantined its environment with the pool and put it in the middle of nowhere because of the bit I didn't really get down into here, where the oxygen, as it's vacating the system, one of the things it's going to do is also building an oxygen bubble there, a little pressure bubble. And that pressure bubble is going to quarantine the system within the structure from the outside world and environment. And it does that. We also put some granite rings around this tail right here, the same way we put little rings around our wires to stop AC hum and buzz. These were all things that, up until we understood electronics and how things work, didn't make any sense to us. But now when you see it as a system, all the pieces make sense. The rocks here were designed initially, when the system's at flow, to allow that static electricity to flow through there, but not allow the waters to flow through there. You want to control the environment. And as this oxygen bubble grows, and you squish the system and you quarantine it, to eventually that static electricity is coming down and shorting through the system and through the wall, that the southern wall, which is where we found a nice little crack in the wall, which was an electrical crack, a scarring of electrical arcing to the conduit that is actually behind the crack that we found after we drilled through the crack to find the conduit. That would be where the electricity was being extracted from the room, and/or utilized within the room, and what was extracted was actually something that, well, we can debate on what was extracted. How about that? Let's debate on what was extracted, because I do have some ideas that aren't always just electrons. I think there's more to the picture. This conduit is actually placed a little bit further back. So if like we were doing something where you had the two metal balls, what we have here is a third metal ball that's kind of like floating over here. And what we're doing is we're going to make the distance between those two be in such a way that the energy wants to jump to this one because it sees it as the path of least resistance, but we catch it in the system with such a high capacity that it gets trapped within the system. And I believe that's the harvest that this structure is looking for. This conduit is shorted to true ground, true natural ground. Far below this, there's a section called Osiris's Tunnel. That one goes down to the water table. That has a conduit at the second elevation that shoots off and goes straight towards the Great Giza Pyramid. That is the true ground that this system is being coaxed with. That is I was giving you the ball option there. The true ground is really what the potential is being built up against. The nature's potential is the ambient energies from above, the static electricity from above, wanting to short with natural earth ground. And we catch it in the middle, either in by making it form an element that we catch. It would be an element, it would be a compound, or the actual energy itself is captured within the system, and that's where we're going to play. For right now, I just want to make it a little spark or something. That would be good enough for me. And I think the easiest way to do that would be, since we're not going to try to capture it, you can have that actually. If you notice, it's shorted back around here, which would allow for some movement of the system to always allow nature to be working. And you're looking for the energy that's hit its peak, and that's what we're tapping off. And this would kind of be, when you look at it, when you look at the Edleet Skalnin's PMH, this is kind of where they have a energy flow which is constant, and they're peeling off of it. Yeah, and you're just playing with nature is really what we're doing here. It's a very green organic system. Now the flow here, the way they do it, we're playing with a distance of about 24 inches is what I understand. The elevation is the difference between, when you look at the spillway, you've got an area where there's that conduit that comes out to the side, and actually there's another conduit right above it. That elevation, when the edge comes up, I mean, it's going to be easier on 3D. The edge comes up is at the same elevation as where the lip is, where it cups the surface of the structure. Not really. Remember, 3D art's not my forte just yet. And if you notice, there are two elevations here. One elevation is about 2 inches higher than the other. That will be the pressure of the water. That will be its amount that when it exceeds, it can push out. The gas is going to need to have an escape. You have a second relief valve, which is just the gas, and that relief valve is the one that's over to the side. That would be the expulsion of the control of the air and the inlet of the water. The air is going to have to go down below a pressure point, and when it recedes off, the water will be allowed to spill in. That would be one of the flow controls to allow the pressures of the air to be at that elevation, which would be about 24 inches higher, but the water level to be within the system at actually a lower elevation, because it has to bubble to get out of the system. So it's going to push down the water level and let the air some air out, the mean, and then the fine control on the top to maintain that water level, and then be letting the air or the gas escaping at a slightly higher elevation at a slightly lower pressure. And the way that they control the pools sets the foot-pounds, or meters, kilograms per square meter, or whatever, pounds, the bars of pressure, whatever way you want to look at it, of the pools to maintain the water level, which would all be below the water level outside of the spillway. And that water level outside of the spillway, we can control, on the outside of the spillway, and using that, the foot-pounds of pressure, or the bars of pressure, of this whole system within here. So we can fine-tune this very, very well. And this can be super easily set up. And that would be why they found loose-fitting rocks, because it was intended for the liquids and gases to be flowing through there. I believe also, if you look at it, that it is going to allow for just this is just a control, but primarily the air, the gas that's coming out, which will be primarily oxygen, I believe, is going to be spurting up, and you can, I believe, see where there's been lots of years of just like a fire hose squirting up in the air and spilling on top of it. Now, that could be from other scarring, but that's what it looks like to me, that there was a burst of this gas. This was running so efficiently that it was bubbling out of there, and then this system, these controls within here, allowed for the control to regulate the water levels within at a lower elevation than the water levels outside. And the pyramids next to it, actually, the way that they play is their whole setup is playing within the natural earth elevation, and the elevation of the gas within there is the pyramid next to it. And the third pyramid, I believe, is where the containment is, because that one is the one that has a little suction valve that comes out, and you get the short of nature and its whole static electricity mean amount, and it shorts down way into the system and allows whatever it is that is collected to be constantly teased or held by the static electric bubble, the control of the third largest pyramid, that is the control containment, which will be at a static electric level not as great as this, and less than or greater than natural earth. And it's quarantined from natural earth because the only way that the waters around this structure will get to there is through the lock system, which is actually located on the east side. So if I was to draw it, it would actually be right here in front of it, where the three pyramids are. And you got that black rock, I think it's basalt or whatever it is, which is a magnetic dampering rock. It is basically like a big Faraday rock for the entire system. It is the Faraday, graphite, like a graphite ring, a filter like this for the entire system of the three structures before the spillway that goes back to the Nile River. There are additional spillways because there are traces that run all over, but that would be the primary spillway, and that spillway actually would come from under the way that the spillway was designed. They would lift up whatever the wall was or whatever and allow waters to flow underneath it, not spilling over from the top. I do not. The way you look at what they like to call the pools, or not the pools, the boat pools or whatever it is, where you can see markings like that. That was designed so that when they pulled, actually it was, if I had drawn it right, it's pulling from the other side, the side where it has like teeth in it, that would be where it was gripping and pulling the wall, and as it pulled the wall it would ride up And as it dried up, water would be allowed to come underneath, and it was actually, they're actually done in this fashion. So when you pull it, it rides up it. And that would be, I don't know, for when there's a flood or something. I don't know. That was your spillway, and that was your primary spillway. There was also other controls. One of the controls would be, if you look at the east side of the structure, where you have the three, I'll say, helper pyramids. These pyramids, you get one of them which is kind of rougher, you get another one's rougher, but the third one is actually like a nicely formed structure. That one also has the internal guts. You notice it has a bubble within it, and then it passes under at a lower elevation below it, and that is done to allow the seepage of, when we're getting into the different densities of the liquids that we're playing with within the structure. We're playing with a heavier dense liquid. I don't know exactly what it is, that's why we gotta engineer it, but you can see it gets to bubble out, and it actually runs down the side, the path. You can follow it. You can see the gully. If you sit there with Google Earth, you can sit there and drop a guy on there, and you can walk down that little road. You can see the runway that went down, came over, and then spilled down and basically came out over the back of the Sphinx. And it joined with a spillway that came out from the side of the second structure, but there's also the causeway, let's call it the causeway, but that was the main spillway, because that one is the one that shorted with the Osiris's tomb. And the whole system, all the waters were joined together. There's just before the black rock I was talking about, which would be to the east of the system, so it's out here floating in midair, and I'm going to draw it over here. There is a conduit that goes down, and it has a wall, then it has another wall, and there's a hole in the one wall. That is where all three of the conduits, or all of the pools, get together to allow a seepage of a liquid which is less dense than what their goal is, but more dense than the light water. So it is some form of heavy water, or it is something other than water, and it is allowed to spill out at a set flow rate. And it is designed, if it gets too much, it raises the whole system, and it is somehow a choke of the system. It may deal with the production of hydrogen or something. Again, until it's exactly modeled and I get more understanding of the different densities of water and what likes to float where, and because of what pressures they could push more, we can understand what the switches and controls are. But it is all a nice setup mechanical system that can be redesigned, and we can start with making it small and then expand out to include the other structures, and watch how certain things will condensate and will form within the other structures under the environments provided. The other structure would be the positive to this one being the negative, being this one is the one that has the abundance of electrons, and that one is the one that is shorted with the higher altitude. So, or at higher elevation, whatever way you want to look at it. The whole system is something to be in awe of, and I really hope people start to appreciate the system and how it was engineered. Even the spillway here, I mean, might as well make this the extended version here. The spillway here, it was in symmetry with the other side, so we know optically what it looked like. It's got a little bump there before it goes down. When you look at it now, it's got wood, but you can find pictures and/or drawings, and you can look to the edge of it. If somebody could sneak a little camera in there and take me pictures, I'd like to share those with people. You know, I need you to send me pictures, please. But there's a lip there that would allow for the heavier dense liquid that is generated within this structure to not be allowed to go down that hallway, to keep that being the light water, when I believe this would be the heavy water, which would spill down back into the system and go through the system, get separated and rejoined, and keep doing that. And almost in belief that I know the system, if allowed to run for hundreds of years, would probably generate enough heavy water that it would turn on. But there is a line, a score mark, ironically enough, right about it there in the system. And I believe that that was actually the fill mark for the heavy water to get the system up and running, along with having a primer of the water up here. They had a primer of the water in here. And then the rest of the water would just be, natural water from the Nile that would fill and saturate the rest of the system. But the heavy water would kind of be maintained within the system, and it's the heavy water that the flow is going. And I do think it's really pretty cool. But if at minimum, just to break the water, rejoin it together, and get a system flow, show that we could, using this design, bring the water level down. And I think we might be able to, if done properly and shielded from the outside world the way they do, maybe get a spark or two out of there. Maybe this can be some sort of a Lord Kelvin a water drop electrostatic generator on steroids. But it is something really cool. So that's about all I can say at this junction. Within the system, it is designed to maintain another elevation of water. When you look at that spillway right here, it actually has where a second elevation of water at a level about, halfway between the floor line and the bottom of the well that is on the sides. You can judge it off the one side because, like I said, they were a mirror image of each other, and that would be the top complete overflow, where if the water level got that high, it would flow into the pit. So if for some reason this got to be such a low volume of like a vacuum that it was sucking the water up like a straw, there was a maximum point it could suck it before the water itself would start spilling into the spillway. But when water was at rest, you had heavy water, you had some sort of a thicker water, and then you had and oh my goodness, it's overflow time level. So it was actually designed to have many controls at its setup, and they did that with the wells, and making the levels of the waters here marry the levels of the waters out on the outside, so they're all like a little juggling game. And it is like I said, it is recreatable. The scale that they did it is a lot easier. If you tried to do this on a small scale, I don't know if you'd be able to get the air and the water to quite play nicely, because you kind of need a bigger scale, like a fish tank size, as opposed to a cup size. But it is a doable scenario. Same thing with up here. We can play with that. Now up here, you also have to pay attention to what is rock and what is granite, or what is rock with minerals in it and what is rock with less minerals in it, because they're playing with the granite, using it as a conductor to coax the static electricity into and play within the system, like the way that the top and back lip of the top and back edge of the antechamber, the pre-chamber to the combustion chamber, they are making it so the condensation that is on the granite is slightly more static electric than the condensation around it. And then when those drips are coming down, they're pooling them and then dropping them over the edge. So I do think we're playing with getting that static electricity, coaxing it into the system through many different methods, and utilizing breaking it itself because any electricity is just the difference between one voltage and another. So we may be playing with multiple states here, and we want one of the states to be able to cause the Lord Kelvin water drip generator spark type scenario that causes the blast every now and then, but we still want to maintain the other conduit as the true source of power, or the true lead. So don't know, like I said, we got to model it, got to play with it. Nature will provide the answers. If somebody something's going to happen, and I think it's going to be special, and I think we should debate it. Please talk to me about it. Thanks. Have a nice day.